everybody, thank you so much for coming down to our first ever sort of event, mostly just a kickoff party and a chance to get all of you down here and get you drunk and maybe take advantage of you later in the vestibule. My name is Brooke O'Shea. This is my partner in crime, Debra Magpie Earling, and we are the Big Montana Story. So we wanted to have this event to introduce ourselves to our community, and that's really you, every single one of you, everyone who writes, who reads, who loves books, who loves stories, who has stories to tell. If you're not in any one of those categories, get out, I guess. But I figure you probably at least in one, probably multiple. So here's what we aim to do, and we want to tell you about it. We want to actually give you a run through of how it's going to work, so you can see how it's going to work on the ground. We have storytellers. They're here to pitch stories. So in that aspect, we're kind of like the moth. We want to find regular people with stories to tell, and I think that's probably everyone in Montana. This is an amazing place with a wealth of amazing stories. So we want to encourage people to come up and tell their stories. But here's the deal. They're not telling the long form version. They're telling kind of a shorter pitch version. So for today, that's going to be a 5-minute max. We're going to give them a 4-minute warning, and then at 5 minutes, we're going to give them an annoying air horn noise, and they're going to be traumatized for life. We also have a panel, and that's what sets us apart, is really this amazing panel of experts right here. So the panel, after each story, is going to give us their initial impressions. They're going to talk about what they could see maybe doing with this story, and as you'll see in a moment, they are all experts in different areas of the media arts. And at the end, after everyone has pitched their story, each panelist is going to pick the story that they would most like to work with, that they could see maybe developing into a big creative project within their field of expertise. And then they're going to talk about that process, how that works. How does a story become a big creative project, whether that is maybe a play on the stage or a short digital feature on YouTube or an article in a magazine. And we're all gonna learn stuff, and we're all gonna have our 2 drinks that we're allowed to have here. And they are amazing drinks. If you have a button, by the way, your first drink is $2 off, I believe. We also have a special drink. Could you tell us about our special drink, Debra?
I should have the creator of the special drink come up. The creator of the special drink, but the creator of the special drink come up and tell us about the debut of the Dorothy Johnson.
Star of the show. Hello. Yeah, thank you all for coming down. Well, the drink was inspired by kind of a taste of the West. And so sagebrush, you know, it's kind of just a rustic flavor. Just happens to pair very well with gin. And so what I did is I took one of our drinks that's kind of commonly on the menu, the honeybee highball, and I took the honey shrub and infused it with sage and juniper berries just to kind of highlight the flavors of the gin, and also just make a very kind of rustic country style highball. And it's a bold drink, as Dorothy Johnson was bold. That's pretty much it. Yeah. I hope y'all enjoy it. Thank you very much.
We should mention, for those of you who don't know who Dorothy Johnson is, this is her drink. She is one of the great American writers of the West. She is the author of the short story that became one of my favorite movies of all time, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. She is one of ours. She taught at the university's creative writing program. She's an underappreciated genius, and she is the flavor of the West. So go drink a little bit of her while you're enjoying some of these other flavors of the West. One more thing I want to mention really quickly is that Because our goal as an organization is really to foster new and unexpected collaborations and get projects started, what we're hoping to do for future events is raise some prize money so that after our panelists have described their projects, we'll be able to have the audience vote on which one they would most like to see become a reality, and we'll actually be able to provide some startup funds to get that project off the ground and to get things started in this town, because it's the kind of town it is, right? I think so. All right, and so without further ado, Debra is going to introduce our brilliant panelists, and then we're going to get started.
I just want to say thank you for all who are in attendance, and for all of you who have a big Montana story. All of the people coming into Montana have brought such a wealth of stories, and I teach a storytelling class at the University of Montana, and I realized that the stories are so profound and so funny at times and so brilliant, that I wanted to provide a place where people could pitch their stories, and those stories might have the opportunity to grow. Maybe your story. I have so many people come up to me and say, do I have a story for you? You know, please write my story. And I thought, you know, there's so many big and brilliant stories, and I'm not that happy with Hollywood these days, are you? So I thought I wanted to provide a place, a forum, where people could pitch their stories, and it would be like Shark Tank meets American Idol. And then maybe your winning story might be a pilot for a television series. Or maybe your winning story might be, I love this term, a major motion picture. Or it could be a play that travels around Montana, and maybe even with the connections that we have here, make it beyond our small town, beyond our state, and into the wider audience. So I conceived of this idea, and I had this brilliant graduate student who was in my fiction class this last year, Brooke. And she told me after she graduated, I will be your minion, and I will help you do things. And she has done things that are, you know, extraordinary. We are now a 501(c)(3) under the umbrella of Montech, and what an amazing thing. And what we most want to do is provide jobs for people in liberal arts. We have talent, we have skills, we have brilliance, genius here, and we want to be the place that exploits it. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. Gregory Johnson is a book all himself, so his introduction is really long. Greg has served as the artistic director of the Montana Repertory Theater since 1990. He is mighty. He spent 20 years working in the professional theater in New York as an actor, stage manager, and director before coming to Montana to run the Montana Rep. Greg has worked with some of the best directors, choreographers, actors, designers, and playwrights in the country. He is involved in every aspect of Montana Rep in the School of Theater and Dance. His Broadway credits include Biloxi Blues, Crimes of the Heart, Is Our Life After High School. He also directed Broadway Brown, Nonsense, The Heidi Chronicles, A Streetcar Named Desire, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. He is responsible for developing the Missoula Colony, a gathering of artists in support of the writer's craft, and the Montana Rep, presenting plays locally of significant social relevance. He has been a review panelist for the National Endowment for the Arts. Greg has also worked for years in the Missoula community, serving on various boards, including projects with the Missoula Children's Theater and Leadership Montana. Internationally, Greg is currently developing a partnership with the Gaiety Theater in Dublin, Ireland. Linwood Field. Linwood Field is a director and actress known for Lost Birds 2011, The Sighting 2016, and From Selma to Stonewall, Are We There Yet? She wrote the script and produced Lost Birds at the University of Montana. Lost Birds is an achingly beautiful film that explores the removal of Native American children from their homes before the Indian Child Welfare Act was put into effect. She was moved by the fact that over 35% of Native American children were removed from their homes before 1978. Lost Spirits was also the name given to all those lost children. Linwood was also the original screenwriter and producer of Perma Red. And I can't say enough good things about her, one of my dear friends. Caitlin Hoffmeister is one of the hosts and producers of the enormously popular sci-fi show, SciShow. I hope it's sci-fi. No, and Animal Wonders, Montana. Caitlin Hoffmeister is a filmmaker and artist, and she would like to be a writer. She moved to Missoula from Portland, Oregon for film school and never left. She's afraid of heights, karaoke, and public speaking. She is one of the most dynamic people I've ever met, and I'm thrilled she's on our panel. Yeah, you do, Brett.
Okay. I get to introduce Brett. Okay, Brett Puryear, my dear friend and occasional bandmate, a bit of a rock star, is our storytelling expert. Self-designated storytelling expert. Just now made that up. If you would like to be designated a storytelling expert by Brett, talk to him after the show. Brett is a recent grad of our awesome MFA program at U of M in fiction. He is regularly seen in Field and Stream magazine. His fiction has been published in the Iowa Review, Fiddle Black, Literary Orphans, and other amazing places that are lucky to have him, each and every one. Brett Puryear. What? Okay. And this is our panel, everybody. Cheers for our panel. All right, so we have 6 storytellers today. Kate, Courtney, Jenny, Ledoux, Sigrid, and Earl will be your storytellers for this afternoon. Would Kate like to come up and go first? Okay, so Kate is our first storyteller, and don't touch it until I'm ready. I'm bad with machines. Okay, this will be the clock. So we're going to give each storyteller 5 minutes. They're going to be able to watch the clock and know how much time they have. And Kate is going to introduce herself and say hi.
Hi, my name is Kate Haleva, and I have worked in Montana politics for 25 years, and for since 2009, I've been working in marijuana politics. I have also written for Salon on marijuana science and politics, and spent a year as a researcher on a book on cannabinoids and cancer. So what I am pitching is a sort of a fictionalized version of my experience. I've conceived it as a series, a movie, and also as Pot, the musical. So here I go. So it's 2009 in Montana. Stan is a blue-collar kid, 28 years old, with a pregnant girlfriend and little hope for a real career until he gets a job in a medical marijuana greenhouse. And Valentine grew up in a political family, became a political blogger. She's a Republican, turned libertarian, turned straight up disillusioned about everything that had to do with politics, and was gonna quit until she became aware of marijuana politics. Gil is 45, and he's got a plan to manipulate the law to burn down the competition and rule MedPot in Montana. Peyton is a political operative with a plan to stop him. So these are just some of the characters who are the crooks and the pioneers and the doctors and the political operatives and the activists and the whacktivists who are wheeling and dealing and healing in Montana on the cusp of marijuana's heyday in Montana. It's conceived as sort of Weeds meets House of Cards meets Northern Exposure, where people turn in for the characters, but they also stay to learn about inside politics, marijuana science, and this phenomenon that is sweeping this country.
So we're going to hear some initial thoughts from our panel. Where do you see that story going? Does it remind you of anything? Does it stir some lust for creation in you? There's a mic right there.
Thank you, Kate. That was awesome. I think there's so much potential in that. That's really, really good. As a filmmaker, the first thoughts that came to my head, there's an HBO show called High Maintenance. You might want to check that out. It started as a web series, and they started it themselves and then got picked up by HBO this year. I could see this as a web series. It would be really, really, really powerful that way. So you're looking at a 5 to 10 minute episode, and then once people can see your pilot and kind of where you're going, you could get picked up big time. So yeah, conflict, Montana, funniness, it would be a great, great idea. Nicely done.
Yeah, I agree. Nice job, nice pitch. Look, it's pretty exciting. I like the idea of a Montana landscape or Missoula landscape. We were talking just before that this is kind of a hot town. You know, it's got there's not a lot of interesting things going on creatively. If you create the mise en scène, that's where we're at. You know, and that's where the story takes place. That's the bed. That's a pretty hot idea too. And the other thing, who directed Nashville? Altman. It's got an Altman feel to it, you know, with many characters and storylines that may or may not meet. And the other thing is, if you ever want, I'm a theater guy, so if you ever want to make a musical, you know, you can you imagine the tunes? Right up there with hair. It could be so cool. Anyway, you go down that path and you find your composer, you know, definitely give me a call. Because you know, we do new stuff here. That'd be a lot of fun. I think it's a fabulous idea.
Agreed. I'm in love with all these characters and can't wait to see what they're going to do. I have a YouTube background, so I was thinking web series. I would love to see it as a musical. That would be a blast. Or both. Yeah, and kids in their basements love YouTube and pods, so. Got a built-in audience. So good job. It's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think people do love pot. Yes, I think this could really work for you. Yeah, I don't know much about writing screenplays, but I think that you could pursue that. It's a very busy story. You know, a lot of characters, Altman style, like you were saying. And yeah, I just have to agree that being set in Montana, really, that's interesting. That's an interesting little juxtaposition between such a busy story against such a stark, lonely landscape, and you can't really set a story in Montana without the landscape actually being a character and playing a significant part in that. So I'd be interested to see how you use that landscape in a story that feels almost kind of urban, you know, and like you said, very Weeds and House of Cards, which is suburban. Urban, but you got this rural landscape. Pretty cool. Yeah. Very interesting.
You can also go to the university in the media arts department, and they have independent credit for students. So if you needed help with a screenplay, they are looking for projects sometimes, and so they get credit for the semester. And then I would also check out My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend if you wanted to do a web series meets musical.
Is that a piece or is that an actual crazy ex-girlfriend?
It's on Netflix. Check out my. No, just kidding. No, it's on Netflix, and it's a combination of a musical meets series. So if you want to go that route.
All right. Thank you so much to our panel, and we are ready for our next storyteller. Courtney? Courtney, are you ready to come up and tell a story?
Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm an artist in town, and I'm a visual storyteller, but very rarely a verbal storyteller. So I have no idea what this would be a pitch for, but I'm just gonna tell it. So it's called Split Brain. My father grew up near a slaughterhouse. Screams and smells of slaughtered flesh filled the air. He enlisted in Vietnam but refused to fight. When he woke up on his 19th birthday, he was in a Tokyo hospital with a severe head injury from a grenade blast. Back home, he drove an orange Barracuda, grew his hair long, blasted Yoko Ono, got arrested for marijuana possession. I was 3 when my father told me about the soldier from his platoon, the one who died in his arms. I sat terrified in the back seat in my footy pajamas as my father kept saying it should have been me, once again going to the hospital where he'd be examined, sedated, sent back home. This night like so many others. Sometimes my father walked to my preschool to pick me up. Sometimes he never made it, and we'd find him on the side of the road post-seizure. We liked to go to films together. At Forrest Gump, he screamed angrily at the screen. At 7, he laughed hysterically. I was 11 when we saw our first foreign film together, Maul's Murmur of the Heart. The sick son and the doting mother end up sleeping together. It was so awkward I could have died, but my father just laughed and laughed. The only advice my father ever gave me was to never put money in my mouth. That's the dirtiest thing around, he told me. When I was 11, he received an experimental operation at Yale Medical School. It severed the corpus callosum, the connection between the hemispheres of the brain. I was taken out of school for 2 months. We stayed with my father's estranged sister. I had an older cousin named Christina. Black eyeliner framed her freckled face. She wore a black tutu and listened to goth music. She gave me 3 Swatch watches, which I wore all together on my wrist like precious gems. I went to the New York City Ballet, ate in fancy restaurants, was gifted clothes from Benettons. I watched Heathers a billion times. In hospital waiting rooms, I read sassy magazines for hours. I thought about the kids at school, felt the pleasure of being away. My father's surgery took the whole day. I gorged on Doritos from Piggly Wiggly, did homework I didn't care about. When he woke up, he looked like Frankenstein's monster, didn't recognize us. But he told us about Ponce de Leon, Magellan, Cortez, Pizarro. What is a wife and child compared with men on grand adventures to distant lands? The failure of my father's surgery was documented and of value to the medical community. To live with the aftermath of experimental surgery is another thing. He'd stare at his hand for hours, saying he didn't recognize it, it didn't belong to him. The evil hand, the one that hit while the other one protested. He started painting watercolors with those hands, one soft and pleasant, the other angry and dark. We called him Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but he was always more Hyde. His threats of suicide became more frequent, louder, more violent. But the split brain operation that had failed my father worked for me, and I returned to 6th grade awakened. I always knew I was different, but now I leaned into it, into the weirdness of my life. Weekends became drives to sanitariums, mental institutions, VA hospitals. We never knew which piece of my father we'd encounter during these visits, but the drives were a time to talk, to listen to music, separate further from my peers. I defined myself as opposite. So long ago, I had already let them all go. To sort of mold it together into a coherent idea. So I'm not alone in this. I know, I'm sorry. It was all mine, except she just made it make more sense. Grace Candace Mancini, she's not here, but I give her credit.
Yeah, I don't know where this belongs. more of it, for sure. And maybe, because there's such an attachment to films, maybe it is a film, was my thinking initially. And it's also like, yeah, I think for me, what I'm tracing is the little girl in the footy pajamas. So like, it's her story or your story if you're the protagonist. And so I love, yeah, I think that everybody can relate to that story, that they're something that failed for their parents helped them somehow. And so I think that's just like a really like beautiful and like old way of literally cutting it open and looking at that relationship. So I have to think about where I think everything belongs in the world, but I really like it. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of small stories there within that longer story. Didn't you say something about a slaughterhouse in the beginning?
Yeah, my father grew up near a slaughterhouse, so
Yeah.
he tell me about it a lot. And that's informed, if you know my artwork, then that's actually
I want
a lot
more
of my...
slaughterhouse.
More slaughterhouse.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
gore.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I love gore, so.
I think we need more gore. We need a good slaughterhouse story.
Yeah.
Is Slaughterhouse 5 really about a slaughterhouse?
Yes.
I've never read the damn thing.
It's about war
Yeah,
and surviving.
I'm no storytelling expert. I've never read that. Yeah, definitely. You've got some prose talent. Well, you and your collaborator.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to break those up into smaller pieces.
Right.
Yeah, that was a nicely written presentation and nicely delivered with great empathy and energy. And it's a harrowing story, actually. It's a very harrowing story. And I think I see it as, I see it as possibly a one-woman show or a short story. Those are the two things that come to mind. And there's a natural structure presented with the operation. So that seems to be a climactic moment. Things fall to the past from that, and things fall to the future from that. So those are my observations. When I say harrowing, I mean that in the best sense. That really, I was sort of dumbfounded by what you've been through. This is a true story.
Yes, this is.
Yeah, and I think that's quite brave of you to bring it to us. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was impressive. I have lots of ideas for you. First of all, I'd like to talk to you afterwards because I'm doing a documentary series that I think this would fit into. So let's talk after this.
Excellent.
I think this would do really, really well with that. Second thing, I can really see this being an interactive performance. So you have a room with different parts that are happening that people can actually come through and interact with, and then maybe you are actually, I love the one-woman show concept, so maybe you're in a section and you can come and just listen to you, which I could listen to this story for a long time. And then you may want to do some research of a local person, Mella Baines, playing Monopoly with God. So she is really taking her one-woman show on the road and really being successful, so that might be a good platform for you to interact. But if you have art that you're already doing, I think it would be amazing to go through and have these different rooms and these experiences and feel what you went through, what your father went through. And Missoula's very open. There's places you can rent and really do that and get a lot of support.
Right.
So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you so much, panel, and thank you, Courtney. All right, can we get Jenny Montgomery up to the stage?
Thank you so much, Brooke, and thank you, Debra, who asked me to do this. I apologize, I'm in my gardening clothes. We had a little injury here this morning. One of our employees was cut badly and was scrambled to hospital, but everybody's going to be okay. So I'm actually pitching about Dorothy Johnson. And when Debra came up with a wonderful idea for the cocktail that many of you are enjoying today, I became very interested in Dorothy, and she's quite a story in herself, and she was better than the story that I had in mind, which is about great-great-grandpa Montgomery meeting with the Indians in Maiden and making pancakes for them all night long, which is a beautiful story but has no comments. So Dorothy Johnson, she was an amazing Montana writer. She was born in 1905 in McGregor, Iowa, and at the age of 6, so in 1911, she comes to Great Falls with her family. And the West is, here's a wonderful quote from her about what it was like. The frontier was long gone, but Whitefish was a child of the late frontier, still being hacked out of the woods. We were kids together. I was a nice little girl, and the town was a sturdy, brawling, mannerless brat that took years to civilize. So, what is so compelling about Dorothy Johnson's story is the way that she wrote the West, and the way that Hollywood then turned her stories and created the Hollywood West. So she was an acute observer of both white culture and native culture in Montana, and this appears in her stories, and she depicts many of the whites who come to the West as tough, unforgiving, desperate people who hoped to better their conditions. And often travelers who were at the end of life's options. So in stories such as The Hanging Tree, the character of Doc Frail has gone through a terrible scandal. He comes out west looking to start a new life, to recreate himself. He's embittered, and he encounters this woman who she calls the Lost Lady, who has been through a traumatic stagecoach robbery and essentially has PTSD and can't go out of the house. And so she researched this extensively, including with psychologists who taught her about agoraphobia. And she was had a tremendous ability to capture this. So she faced many years of failure in her life as a writer. She graduated from the creative writing program in 1928 here at UM, published her first story in 1930, and then had 11 years of rejections. But she had a wonderful spirit, and she couldn't be discouraged or beaten down. And she had, let's see, there's a wonderful story here. She was, lost her father when she was 8, and they were very, very poor. And her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, reeling after my father's death, facing open-eyed our situation of financial need. Guess we'll have beans, she said. Are beans cheap, I asked, knowing cheapness was a great virtue. Nothing's cheap, she answered, and put her face down on her crossed arms while I hovered anxiously. But we went on coping. And she says, I learned young by example the grace of receiving, of being delighted, and never, ever disappointed. And so the story of how Hollywood took her, their version of the West, which was a bit dark, and instead created these, sound stages and outdoor scenes of a successful, progressive West full of happy people, and transformed the Lost Lady, who was deeply traumatized, into an independent pioneer woman who, was extremely upbeat and pretty. So I went looking to find out how she responded, and she wasn't upset at all. The story was greatly changed. And such changes are supposed to infuriate authors, but actually they made sense, and I will even admit that they improved it a bit. I wish I thought of some of them myself. Now, I wonder to what extent that's actually true, but she made money, she became well-known, she achieved her dream of becoming a writer, and I would like to dig a little more deeply into some of the editing sessions that took place when folks from Hollywood would come here to Missoula to meet with her and go over the scripts. So there were many, many funny stories and anecdotes. I don't know if I have time to share all of them. Here's a very funny one. She traveled to Greece, bought an antique pistol, and decided to smuggle it home in her spare girdle. And a very funny scene ensues at U.S. Customs. But she was essentially this indomitable, witty, gritty bobcat of a woman, as someone once described her. So I would like to tell her story, but use it to contrast the two visions of the American West in her fiction and what Hollywood made of those stories.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea for a story. I'm not sure where it would go. At this point, I'm still thinking about it. But one of the things that the Hollywood writer axis is always a really interesting one for me. What's a writer's stake in something that Hollywood does and that kind of thing. Hemingway said he used to go to the Nevada, California border and throw his book as far as he could and run the other way. But once again, he made a lot of money, had a lot of success having his books made into movies. I think I think the juxtaposition of Hollywood and the West is a really cool idea. One thing that came to mind initially was a Ken Burns kind of treatment, where you study this woman in the and as a result, while you're studying this woman, you study the West. You study women writers of the West. You study writers of the West, and then if you're Ken Burns, you bring in Hollywood, because there's the conflict. She doesn't have the conflict herself because she said, "Let's go, let's do it." But there's the conflict between the culture, and I think a visit to Missoula from these Hollywood types. There's some great scenes there, right, in the 20s. Some great scenes there. But I think some kind of a documentary feeling with the story being told, her story being told, which also enlightens so many other things about the West and about Hollywood's interaction with the West.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think the story was greatly changed would be the title, which would be a direct quote from her. Immediately, I think you could write a Kick-Ass Believer article about it, and I would read that. I love the idea of the doc as Ken Burns style, or a series of like the anecdotes that you wanted to share. Something that's interesting is that you said she graduated in 1928. I graduated from college in 2007, right before a recession. She graduated right before the Depression. Like that could be an interesting way to tie it into what people are feeling now. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I like it. I'm excited about it.
Jenny, you are a rainbow. I think that the stories about revealing the Great West, they just seem to always turn out great art. It's just something really powerful about turning that fake West of Hollywood on its head. You know, Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, like a gothic take on the West, and books like Blood Meridian that really just reveal how ugly the West really was, and I definitely see this as film, for sure. Definitely a documentary, maybe with those live action reimaginings, except not shitty. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. I immediately went to logistics, so to even proceed in any kind of film world, do you have any kind of connection to somebody you could get the option for? So before you even put a bunch of work into this, can you tell this story? It's kind of where I went before I even thought about what it could be. So that might be something you want to look into before you put too much energy into it, you know. And I'm from Whitefish, so I think there's a lot of interesting elements to that. But if you did get the option, which is a whole process in itself, and you can call me about that if you want, I could see this as a 3-part series, and you kind of look at like Ken Burns' style, but like that's a really popular thing now. You have these really long stories, but you could break it into 3-part hours. And I kept thinking maybe childhood, education, and Hollywood, and then people could really follow like where the changes went. But yeah, logistically, there's a lot if you want to do a film. So, thanks.
All right, thank you, panel. Thank you so much, Jenny. Our next storyteller is Ledoux. Can we get Ledoux to the stage?
Okay. Let's get this thing. Can you hear me all right? Are your ears in good condition? That's good, because I've heard a lot of reverb sometimes. Okay. My name's Ledoux Hansen. I come from east of the divide over here, and I was privileged to be part of the MFA program for some years and meet Debra Earling and some of the other very talented people involved with this program. The story that I want to bring you today is a true story, that originated in the Arrow Creek Breaks near where I grew up, on a homestead just east of Square Butte. And I've taken some liberties with it, not really liberties, I just fill in details. I only found the bones of this story, and I've been working with it for over 15 years, starting with a narrative, with a kind of an elegy, poem of the era of the Missouri Breaks. And it was something that happened when I was a child, about 12 or 13 years old. And I think, in all honesty and fairness, I should start timing myself right now.
Oh my God.
Okay. The Arrow Creek Breaks are a land formation that lies between what's called the Golden Triangle, where the wheat grows, and the Utica and the cattle country, where the Yogo sapphires are mined, and Charlie Russell painted his pictures of Square Butte in the cattle country. They are formed of glacial till from ancient seas. You can still find stones there that the dinosaurs used to aid their digestion. And right now they're a chaotic mix of volcanic ash from the Shawkonite volcanics about 40 million years ago. And they're notable, you'll know them if you come to them, by their lack of structure. They go on for about 27, 40 miles, depending on your route, from the Highwood Mountains to the Missouri River in the White Cliffs area. And people have been lost there, and there are legends there. But the main thing that the old drovers, the oxmen who drove the wagons from Lewistown to Fort Benton or Helena will tell you, is that once that clay starts to swell, you're done for, because it's called gumbo. I see some people nodding their head. You know gumbo. Yeah, my husband didn't at first. We went for a walk in it. It will stop your axles. It will stop a cow. I don't know this for a fact, but I think the buffalo avoided it, especially when it rained. And there are 4 elements in this story. One is the landscape, the weather. Another is a young girl and her idealism. Another is, you always need this man, a drifter from elsewhere. And the last is her father, who actually was known by his nickname, Cowboy. So we'll call him Cowboy. The family's rather private. I heard this story first when I was about 13 years old, and Mary, who was one of the girls who grew up in the breaks near them, was a cowgirl, and she was about 5 or 7 years older than I was. I didn't know her, but she was a cowgirl, and she was beautiful. You have to believe this, she was beautiful. She had wild hair, dark, and she could heel rope better than anyone south of the Missouri, better than anyone. And she was the apple of her father's eye. Cowboy was the son of old Mary, who had grown up and ranched in the breaks after her husband died and raised 6 children there. Now young Mary was her granddaughter. Mary went to high school. She rode with her father, Cowboy. She rode in the breaks. And I wrote first, say, an elegy about this, and the latest thing I did, it was something like a Scottish ballad. I promise I'll not sing or recite any 36 or 40 stanzas of it, but here's the opening. Have you ever been down in the Arrow Creek breaks when the meadowlark flies in the spring? Through the sleet and the clay we rode after the strays, where the flies and the rattlesnakes sing. Yippee-ki-yay-yo through the sleet and the snow, you're done when the clay starts to swell. For the old trovers say that Arrow Creek clay has its bottom in shadow or hell. And Mary, well, the cowboys all fell in love with her after she graduated. Her father was sorry to lose his top hand, but of course he wanted her to go to college. And I want to tell you that I don't see this as a story of one woman. I see this as kind of a place where life steps accidentally into that quicksand called story or legend. and takes on all the scary attributes. Someone the other day in the fairy tale storytelling thing said, "A love is sublime. It's something beautiful you fall in love with, and it can kill you." And that's the way the Arrow Creek breaks are. That's the way the Montana weather is, and that's how Mary was, that idealistic young girl. She loved that country, and her grandmother was a legend to her. Oh my God, that quick? I used it all up. Anyway, I'll tell you. She fell in love with a man from the South, one of the oil men who had come up to look for black gold. And they never found it, of course, but Phillips he was, and his talk was as smooth as sweet Texas crude. And they say that his eyes, when he saw them, were cold. But she only saw love there and a life. And he told her he wanted to ranch in the breaks. And Mary went with them, and she wouldn't listen to her father or to anyone. And the first year, they had a little shack down there. They had a child. The next year, another child. And 2 more followed. And then, one of those fall days, when it's warm at the end of May, sweet end of May, Phillips told her, "I'm going into town for beer, honey, do you mind?" And she said, "We'll come along. I don't want to stay here alone." And he said, "There's no room in the truck, but I'll be right back." And she stayed there alone with the children. Phillips went into town, and he was seen drinking in many bars, saying, "I told her I got rid of it. Beep. And I'll go back when I'm good and ready." And Mary stayed with the children, and they ate, you can guess, what, bread the first day, maybe some meat the second. The horses were running free. She was afraid, she knew the weather. And sure enough, on the 3rd day, the weather changed, and a blizzard, that spring blizzard, blew in. It was one of those false sunny days at the sweet end of May. And it was cold, and there was no firewood, there was nothing. But Mary knew the breaks, and she trusted them, and she knew herself. She was a strong woman. She chased cattle all over that landscape, and she thought if you stayed to the ridges where the old rocks were, she could take the children. Now these were 4 young children under the age of 5, and no one knew it yet, but she had another one in her room. And they set out with sandwiches. And while they were there, Philip stayed in town, in Fort Benton, I think it was, and he was drinking with his friends, and he said, "I'll go home when I'm good and ready." And then the blizzard came, and the people told him, even the boys in the bar, "You should go home and check on Mary." And he started out in the truck, and he didn't get very far before the gumbo took him, and he said, "I can't go any farther. I'll have to turn back." And turn back he did. That's what he did do. And that was when he finally told someone, the people in the town, that they should go after Mary. It was a bright sunny day at the false end of May, just about rodeo time. And here we find a friend of mine, an old friend who was then a young cowgirl at the Geraldine Rodeo Grounds, who saw 2 men come riding in, an old cowboy and also Cowboy, Mary's father. Right, dark. They had found the bodies strung out along the ridge. I like to think that Mary went back to her mother. And I will end this very quickly and tell you that her father didn't let it go. But he found Phillips one day and roped him. Roped him and put him in the pickup and said, "Wouldn't you like to see where Mary died?" He told no one of this except one good friend. And when he'd taken him there, he said, "Take a good look around. This is the last thing she saw. And it's the last thing you'll ever see." And he shot him there and dug a grave. And you know that crowd leaves no sign. Thank you.
What a voice. Nicely sung. Very nice. Have you ever read Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson? Yeah, that's kind of how I see this story. Train Dreams is a novella kind of set in the turn of the 20th century, and it's told in an almost mythic fashion. A story of a man who loses his family on a forest fire. And just your story reminds me a lot of that. I can kind of see it written in the same style and a similar length, sort of not a novel but a novella. Because the thing that really kind of grabbed me here was that almost mythic way in which you describe the landscape. Dinosaurs, ancient seas. That, I don't think that needs to take the center stage, but that provides such a nice backdrop to tell a kind of ordinary, but not ordinary, but a realistic tale in a sort of mythic fashion. Is kind of what I would like to see with that. Pretty moving story, but also very strange.
Yeah, I like the Dennis Johnson comparison a lot too. I was sort of thinking of Tom Hardy because I was thinking about using the landscape as character, and who we're tracing in this story keeps changing. We're with the girl, but then we're with the drifter, but then we're with back with the girl and her kids, we're with the grandma, we're with the dad, but the landscape's always there. So it's a fantastic ghost story before the ghost story. And yeah, I like a novella or maybe something that lets the landscape shine like a sweeping, like Gone with the Wind. It seems like a sweeping, you have vast views of things. I don't think this story could be contained in something like a YouTube series or something narrow. But it's really beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's a beautiful story. I think my impression is it is exactly what it is. It's an epic poem, and with the Scottish ballad feeling thrown in. I think of the Hiawatha, Longfellow's Hiawatha. I think of The Face on the Ballroom Floor. I think of the other one I thought of, the Ballad of Reading Jail. That each verse builds upon itself and its emotional connection to the piece. And you bring such a strong emotional connection and life to it that's so compelling. I think, I would be bold-faced and do it as a reading with a cello. And then when you break into song, you break into song. I think that could be a really nice 45 minutes. I think it could be really beautiful. You find your sequence, you find the line of the story you want to tell, and you keep to your cadence and that beautiful your voice. It's just compelling. It's great to be with. So that's the direction I'd take it with this material.
Please record this. Record this. Get this in audio. So I think that I see this as something that you may want to look at the sound design element of the media arts department and have them record your story. I could have listened to that forever. So I would really recommend, at least very minimum, get this in an audio version. Then there's a million different things you can do with this. I can see this as a podcast. I can see this as, there's an NPR series that animates stories based off people's audio. So your voice and your storytelling is all it needs, in my opinion, right now. So that's what I would recommend, is really trying. I don't know if they're doing sound design anymore. Do you know? They had a really strong sound design in the media arts, and I'll find out for you if you want, but get into a professional studio and record that story.
Thank you so much, panel, and thank you so much, Ledoux. Ledoux will be our final story because we're running kind of long because stories are kind of like that. So we've got a few things, and I'm going to turn this over to Debra.
Yes. You know, I'd like to hear kind of from the panelists, which did such a brilliant job today. Can we hear a round of applause for our panelists? Amazing. Could you possibly speak, panelists, to just to conclude this first kickoff for the Big Montana Story? Some of your impressions, some of your ideas, and any of your suggestions for us would be much appreciated.
Well, we've already talked a little bit about it, the landscape, how important the landscape is here, how important the land, how big a part of all the stories the land is, and if it's a big Montana story, the big Montana land is, my guess, is going to be a pretty big part of it, even if it's in juxtaposition with marijuana or in juxtaposition with Hollywood. There's the Montana bedrock. That I think that, and first of all, let me commend you all for starting this and doing this. It's such a big idea, and it can only do very well because of the ambition of the idea. So I tip my hat to you all for doing this and bringing this party to town. And I would, yeah, my thing is just, you know, it's about the town, it's about the land.
Thank you, everybody, for coming here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a panelist. This is an awesome idea. I guess my thing I want to leave with is I don't want this just to be a pitch of an idea. I'd like to see some of these become a reality. So I think in the future, I think it would be really helpful to have our contact info and other people in the community who can make this happen. I would really love to have a follow-up with all of these stories in some kind of media platform. So whatever that means, and I am the person who really, really wants to see that. So please, every panelist, come talk to me and I'll see what I can do. And all of us here are people that believe in this community to make these happen. They're wonderful. Every one of these stories was powerful. So thanks.
Yeah, seconded. These were beautiful. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this. I'm not an expert. He is. But I do think that, like, what a fantastic, I mean this is the highest compliment, what a fantastic group of weirdos we had up here today. Like, everybody has such a unique perspective on how to tell these brilliant, amazing stories, and like taking that and running with it. And I'm sure everyone here also has stories that they have this beautiful view on. And so thanks for doing this, and thanks for being here, everybody. It's really fun.
Yeah, was it a Jim Harrison poem that, I think the last line is something along the lines of death steals everything but our stories. And I agree with that. So I think this is just such a wonderful thing to put together, to get people together to tell their stories. I mean, they're really the only thing that we have that are going to stick around. And, I really love just people who aren't necessarily writers or filmmakers coming in and pitching stories. You know, I think there are people on every street corner, on every sidewalk, on every road in Missoula. And it could even be someone with no education, but just filled with beautiful stories. And I just think this thing could go really far. As far as suggestions to make it better, I almost want to say that you could theme. You could. And I hate theming things. I think it's just really cheap, especially when you're doing writing. Oh, why don't you write with this theme? It's stupid. But I think it could really. It could be nice for an event like this to, especially when you're promoting it, to say, okay, this Sunday we're doing a big Montana story on landscape or mining or something Montana-like, and you know, get people kind of writing about something in particular that is related. Yeah. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank Lisa Green, our co-producer. I'd like to thank Jenny Montgomery for hosting us. I'd like to thank Rachel Mendel for this whole huge book festival. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and to our judges for such just being on the spot and coming up with these brilliant ideas. I love it. I'm just going to say one brief thing. We started this project also, and Brooke was the one who really hit it home for me. Because I've always, I come from a storytelling family. Indians tell stories. This is the gathering place of the oldest stories in the world. And I have worked in legal services, and I've worked in the law. And Brooke is an attorney and actually taught maritime law in Ethiopia. And we had this discussion one night, and one of the most profound things I think I've ever heard about storytelling was from Brooke. And she said, stories are about justice. People want to tell their stories because it is a matter of justice. And when they say you have your day in court, you don't get to tell your story. And so this is a forum to tell those stories. I see it as a platform, and I'm hoping that we can take this on the road across Montana to all those small and little places and big places in Montana, and ask people to come and tell their stories. Whether or not it becomes produced in anything, the act of telling the story in a public forum is a powerful, powerful thing. And thank you all for being part of our kickoff for the Big Montana Story. I think it's going to be big because the people of Montana have a big heart. And so thank you all. Thank you for coming, and we kicked it off.
All I have to add to that is a quick thanks to our sponsors, 5 on Black and Zoo City Apparel. And thank you guys so much for coming. This means the world to us, and we really look forward to hearing more and more stories and creating more and more connections in this community. And I just have to say thank you so much to Debra Magpie Earling. This is her vision, and she is really a woman of vision. So thank you so much.